On a quiet suburban street, where every house looked the same but every neighbor was different, James had always been the kind of guy to mind his own business. He worked hard, kept his home in perfect shape, and never bothered anyone. But one thing had been testing his patience for months: his next-door neighbor, Mr. Thompson. The man had made it clear from the day James moved in that he didn't like him. Whether it was the way he scoffed at James' new car, ignored his greetings, or made snide comments about keeping the neighborhood the way it used to be, it was obvious. James had dealt with worse before, so he let it slide. That is, until Thompson started using his pool like it was his own personal resort. It started small, an occasional glance over the fence when James was swimming, a comment about how lucky he was to have such a nice pool. Then James started noticing wet footprints near the gate when he came home, even when he hadn't used the pool. His pool chairs were slightly moved, and the water level was lower than it should have been. One day, he caught Thompson's teenage sons sneaking out of his backyard, dripping wet, trying to escape before being noticed. That was the final straw. James confronted Thompson about it, expecting an apology, maybe even some embarrassment. But instead, the man smirked. "Oh, come on, it's just a pool. You people love sharing, don't you?" That one sentence sent a wave of anger through James, but he knew better than to react emotionally. He took a deep breath and walked away. But James wasn't just going to let it go. He believed in handling things the right way, and if Thompson wanted to test him, he was ready to give him a lesson he wouldn't forget. He spent the next few days thinking about the perfect way to deal with the situation. Calling the police, too much trouble. Setting up security cameras, a good idea, but it wouldn't stop Thompson from finding another excuse. Then one evening, as he was scrolling through his phone, an idea struck him. He chuckled to himself, shaking his head. "Oh, this is going to be good." The next morning, James made a few calls. He reached out to an old friend who worked in exotic animal services, asking if he could borrow something. Unexpected. His friend laughed at the request but agreed to help. A few days later, the plan was set. The only thing left to do was wait. James purposely left home early that Saturday, making sure Thompson and his family saw him driving away. He knew they would take the bait. Sure enough, just an hour later, his security cameras, now installed and fully operational, caught Thompson and his guests walking right into his backyard, towels in hand, ready to enjoy another day of using something they had no right to. James watched the live footage on his phone, shaking his head. They were lounging like they owned the place, laughing and splashing in the water without a care in the world. They really thought they could get away with it. That's when James pulled into his driveway, stepped out of his car, and walked straight into the backyard with a knowing smirk. The moment Thompson saw him, his face went pale. "Oh, hey there, James. We were just—" He stammered, but James held up a hand. "No need to explain," he said coolly. "I actually brought something special for you." With that, James walked over to the cage sitting near his patio and opened it. The sound of the metal creaking caught everyone's attention. Within seconds, the backyard erupted into chaos. Thompson's wife screamed, the teenagers scrambled to get out of the pool, and even Thompson himself turned ghost white as he stared at what James had just released. James simply folded his arms and watched, amusement dancing in his eyes. "You wanted to enjoy my pool. Well, I figured I'd get a new lifeguard." The panic screams, the sheer look of horror on their faces. It was more satisfying than he ever imagined. And the best part, this was just the beginning. Thompson's entire family scrambled to the other side of the pool, eyes wide with sheer panic. The sight of the large reptile slithering out of the cage had them frozen in place, too terrified to move but desperate to escape. Thompson himself was gripping the pool ladder, his knuckles white, as if debating whether to make a run for it or stay completely still. James stood by, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. He hadn't planned on physically scaring them, just making a point they wouldn't forget. "Relax," James said, his voice calm, almost amused. "It's just a big lizard. Shouldn't be a problem for someone who thinks they own my backyard, right?" Thompson swallowed hard, his bravado from earlier completely gone. His wife was shaking, clutching their youngest son, who looked close to tears. The teenagers, usually so cocky, were now frantically looking for an exit. James let the moment stretch, watching them squirm. He knew exactly what they were thinking. How could they get out without getting too close to the lifeguard he'd just introduced? He had made sure to bring in something completely harmless. But of course they didn't know that. It was a large, exotic-looking monitor lizard, impressive enough to cause fear, but not a real threat. His friend had assured him it was used to being around people and wouldn't lash out unless provoked. After a long silence, Thompson finally found his voice. "All right, James," he said, his tone forced and uneasy. "You've made your point. Just get it away, and we'll leave." James raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you mean leave my pool?" "The same pool you've been using for weeks without permission. Funny how you only care when you're uncomfortable." Thompson clenched his jaw, his face flushing red, but he had nothing to say. He knew James was right. James took a slow step forward, tilting his head as he looked at the soaking wet family. "See, that's the thing," he continued, his voice carrying the weight of every moment he'd held his tongue, every time he'd let Thompson's snide comment slide. "You never asked. You never thought twice about taking something that wasn't yours. And when I confronted you, you laughed, acted like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter." Thompson shifted uncomfortably, his wife tugging at his arm, silently urging him to just apologize and get out of there. But James wasn't done yet. "I could have called the police," James said, his voice steady. "Could have pressed trespassing charges, made sure you learned your lesson the hard way. But you and I both know how that would have played out, don't we?" He let the words hang in the air, unspoken truths settling between them. Thompson's expression darkened, but he didn't argue. He knew exactly what James was saying. He had always relied on the unspoken privilege that allowed him to get away with things like this, things he wouldn't dare try with any of their other neighbors. James exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "I'm not looking for trouble, Thompson. I never have. But I won't be disrespected in my own home. Not by you. Not by anyone." A tense silence followed. The only sound was the faint rustling of leaves and the nervous shuffling of Thompson's family. Then slowly James whistled, and the lizard calmly turned and began to move back toward its cage. The moment was over. The message had been sent loud and clear. Thompson exhaled, his entire body relaxing as the fear drained from his face. Without another word, he motioned for his family to follow him. They rushed out of the pool, dripping wet, grabbing their things in a hurry. As they passed James, his eyes locked onto Thompson's for one final moment. No words were needed. Thompson understood. When the gate clicked shut behind them, James stood still for a while, letting the silence settle. Then he let out a slow breath, a small smile tugging at his lips. He hadn't planned on taking it this far, but watching Thompson scurry away like a scolded child, that had been worth it. He walked over, securing the lizard's cage again, giving it a pat as if thanking it for playing its role so well. He knew Thompson wouldn't be coming back. The pool, the backyard, his space, was finally his again. And from that day on, it stayed that way. Later that evening, James sat on his porch, sipping his iced tea as the sun dipped below the horizon. He could still hear the faint sound of splashing water, but this time it was coming from his own invited guests, his nieces and nephews, who were now enjoying the pool as they should have been all along. The contrast between the laughter of his family and the tense silence of Thompson's departure earlier that day made him shake his head. He had spent years trying to ignore the way his neighbor treated him, but today he had finally drawn the line. As the evening settled in, James noticed his phone buzzing on the table. A text from his friend Marcus popped up. Asterisk asterisk heard what happened. You good? Asterisk asterisk, James chuckled, shaking his head. News traveled fast in their neighborhood, especially when it involved drama. He replied quickly, asterisk asterisk, yeah, man. Just had to remind Thompson whose pool this really is. Asterisk asterisk. Marcus responded almost instantly. Asterisk asterisk, about time. You let him get away with too much. Asterisk asterisk. James sighed. That much was true. Thompson had been a problem for a while, not just with the pool, but with a lot of things. There was the time he accidentally parked in James' driveway and acted like it was no big deal. Or the time he made an offhand comment about how nice James' house was for someone like him. James had brushed those moments off, giving Thompson the benefit of the doubt. But deep down, he knew Thompson saw him as someone who didn't belong. The next morning, James expected things to settle down. He had made his point, and he figured Thompson would keep his distance. But as he stepped outside to get his morning paper, he saw Thompson standing by his fence, arms crossed, a forced smirk on his face. Nice trick you pulled yesterday, Thompson said, his tone light but edged with something else. James raised an eyebrow. It wasn't a trick, just a reminder. Thompson scoffed. You think you scared me? Please, you just made yourself look ridiculous. James folded his arms. Funny, because you didn't seem so confident when you were climbing out of my pool soaking wet. Thompson's smirk faltered, but he recovered quickly. Doesn't matter. My kids were terrified. That was reckless, James. What if someone got hurt? James let out a short laugh. Oh, now you care about safety. You didn't seem too worried when you were sneaking into my yard night after night. You didn't think about what could have happened if I had called the cops instead of handling it my way. For a moment, Thompson said nothing. Then, in a lower voice, he muttered, well, maybe I should have called the cops on you. James' jaw tightened. There it was. The threat. The unspoken reminder that Thompson still thought he had the upper hand, that he could twist the situation to make James the villain. James took a slow step forward. Go ahead, he said quietly. Call them. Tell them how you've been trespassing on my property for weeks. Tell them how you ignored every warning. Let's see who gets in trouble first. Thompson's face twitched, his confidence slipping. He turned away with a huff, muttering something under his breath before walking back into his house. James exhaled, shaking his head. He knew Thompson wasn't done. He was the kind of man who hated losing. And if there was one thing James had learned over the years, it was that people like Thompson never let things go. Sure enough, the next few days were tense. Thompson no longer used the pool, but James could feel the shift in the air. He would catch Thompson watching from his window, his wife whispering in hushed tones whenever James walked by. A few of their other neighbors seemed to be avoiding him too, likely having heard some twisted version of what happened. Then one evening, just as James was locking up for the night, he heard a knock at the door. When he opened it, he wasn't surprised to see Marcus standing there, arms crossed. But what did surprise him was the look on his face. You need to see this, Marcus said, holding up his phone. James frowned and took the phone. On the screen was a post from the neighborhood group chat. His stomach dropped as he read the words. Asterisk asterisk constable neighbor threatens family with dangerous animal over simple misunderstanding. Is our community still safe? Asterisk asterisk. And right below it was a picture, one Thompson had clearly taken from his window, of James standing next to the lizard, with Thompson's family looking terrified in the background. The story had been twisted into something completely different, and now the whole neighborhood was talking about it. James stared at the phone screen, his pulse quickening as he scrolled through the comments beneath Thompson's post. Asterisk asterisk, this is unacceptable. Someone like that doesn't belong in our neighborhood. Asterisk asterisk. Asterisk asterisk, threatening a family. That's disgusting. We should do something about it. Asterisk asterisk. Asterisk asterisk, does anyone know if the police were Khalid asterisk asterisk? James clenched his jaw. It was happening exactly how he feared. The truth was being twisted, and suddenly asterisk he asterisk was the problem. Thompson had crafted the perfect lie, playing the victim while making James look like a dangerous neighbor. It didn't matter that it was asterisk his asterisk pool, asterisk his asterisk backyard, asterisk his asterisk property being disrespected. People were already picking sides, and James could see which way the tide was turning. A heavy sigh escaped him as he handed Marcus back his phone. I knew he wouldn't let it go, James muttered. But this is low, even for him. Marcus shook his head, frustration clear in his eyes. What are you gonna do? You can't just let this ride, man. If people believe this nonsense, they could take it too far. James rubbed his temples. He had already seen it before. How quickly rumors could spread, how easily a lie could shape someone's reality. He had worked hard to be respected in this neighborhood, but it only took one person's false story to undo everything. As if on cue, a knock sounded at the door. Both men exchanged looks before James cautiously approached. He cracked it open and immediately tensed. Two uniformed police officers stood on his doorstep, their expressions unreadable. Mr. Carter, one of them asked. James nodded slowly. Yeah, that's me. We received a complaint from a concerned resident about an incident involving a possible threat in the neighborhood. Mind if we ask you a few questions? James let out a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Let me guess, he said, crossing his arms. This is about my asterisk dangerous asterisk pet. One of the officers cleared his throat, shifting on his feet. The report we received mentioned an aggressive animal being used to intimidate a family. Marcus let out a scoff behind him. Oh, come on. You guys see how ridiculous that sounds, right? James nodded. I don't own any aggressive animals. I own a pool. One that my neighbor has been using without my permission for weeks. He glanced between the two officers, measuring their reactions. I assume he didn't mention that part. The officers exchanged glances, but their faces remained neutral. We're just here to get both sides of the story, one of them said. Would you mind explaining what happened? James took a deep breath. He knew how this worked. He had seen it before. One wrong word, one misstep, and this situation could turn into something bigger than it needed to be. He had to be careful. So he laid it out clearly. He explained how Thompson and his family had been trespassing on his property, how he had asked them to stop multiple times, how they ignored him, and how, finally, he decided to teach them a lesson in a way that didn't involve calling the cops. He even pulled up the security camera footage on his phone, showing the officers exactly how Thompson's family had been sneaking into his backyard for weeks. When he was done, the officers were quiet for a moment before one of them sighed. All right, he said. That does change things. James could tell they weren't fully convinced yet, but at least they weren't immediately treating him like a criminal. "So what now?" he asked. The officer hesitated. "We'll have to speak with Mr. Thompson again and let him know what we've learned. But if this turns into an ongoing dispute, it might be best to settle it through legal channels rather than other means." James fought the urge to roll his eyes. Of course, they were suggesting legal action, after Thompson had already tried to drag his name through the mud. But he kept his cool and nodded. "I understand." As the officers left, Marcus shook his head. "You know Thompson isn't gonna let this go, right?" James sighed. "Oh, I know. But he's about to find out that I'm not letting it go either." Because this time, James wasn't just going to sit back and wait for the situation to blow over. He had played nice for too long. Now it was time to make sure everyone in the neighborhood knew the real asterisk story. That night, James couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind replayed the events of the day. Thompson's smug face, the police knocking on his door, the way the officers had hesitated before leaving, as if they still weren't sure who to believe. It didn't sit right with him. He had shown them proof yet somehow he knew this wasn't over. Sure enough, the next morning, James woke up to a string of text messages and missed calls from neighbors. Some were supportive, saying they saw the ridiculous post Thompson had made online and knew it was a lie. Others were more hesitant, asking James what really happened and if they should be concerned. Then there were the ones he had expected, the ones who sided with Thompson, warning James that this was a peaceful community and that causing trouble wouldn't end well. Frustrated, James stepped outside to clear his head, only to stop dead in his tracks. His pool was drained. The sparkling blue water that had once been the centerpiece of his backyard was completely gone, leaving behind an empty, sun-baked shell. The pool cover had been tossed aside, and the filtration system was completely wrecked, as if someone had ripped out the hoses and deliberately tampered with it. Marcus, who had just arrived for their morning coffee routine, let out a low whistle. "Man, this is next-level petty." James clenched his fists. He knew who had done this. There was no way this was a coincidence, not after everything that had happened. Before he could even process his next move, a familiar voice called out from over the fence. "Oh no, what happened to your pool?" James turned sharply to see Thompson standing there, fake sympathy plastered across his face. James didn't take the bait. He kept his expression calm. "Looks like someone decided to mess with it." Thompson tusked. "That's a shame. Guess you won't be needing that alligator anymore, huh?" James narrowed his eyes. That was when it hit him. Thompson wasn't just gloating. He wanted James to snap. He was baiting him into reacting, waiting for him to make a mistake, to give him an excuse to take this further. But James wasn't about to play into his hands. Instead, he smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "You're right," he said smoothly. "Guess will have to do something different." Thompson's smirk faltered just a little, and James could tell, for the first time, his neighbor was starting to feel uneasy. Good, because James had an idea, and this time, Thompson wasn't going to see it coming. James wasted no time putting his plan into motion. He made a few calls, pulled some strings, and within days, his backyard was swarming with workers. Trucks came in and out, carrying materials, and the sound of construction filled the air. Thompson watched from his porch, arms crossed, clearly trying to figure out what was happening. But James didn't offer any explanations. He simply went about his business, acting as if everything was perfectly normal. Then, after a week of work, the transformation was complete. James had not only restored his pool, He had expanded it. The new setup was bigger, sleeker, and designed for maximum entertainment. But that wasn't the best part. The best part was the brand new security system James had installed. Cameras covered every angle, motion sensors lined the perimeter, and to top it all off, he hired a private security company to monitor the property 24/7. That evening, James invited friends and neighbors over for a grand reopening pool party. Music played, laughter filled the air, and the smell of barbecue drifted over the fence. It was a direct message to Thompson. James wasn't going anywhere, and he definitely wasn't going to let himself be bullied. As the sun set, James noticed Thompson pacing in his backyard, clearly irritated by the celebration. Then, as expected, Thompson made his move. He snuck over in the dark, trying to get closer, probably hoping to find some excuse to start another argument. But the second he set foot on James's property, the security lights blazed on, and an alarm blared through the speakers. Within moments, security guards appeared, and before Thompson could react, they had him on camera, trespassing on private property. The look of shock on his face was priceless. James calmly walked over to the fence, arms crossed. "Something wrong, Thompson." Thompson stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but it was too late. The guards handed James the footage, and James knew exactly what he was going to do with it. The very next morning, he took it straight to the Homeowners Association. Thompson had spent years complaining about others breaking the rules, but now James had proof that he was the one causing trouble. The HOA wasted no time. Thompson was fined, warned, and forced to issue a formal apology. But the real blow came when he realized James had filed an official police report for trespassing. With his record, it wasn't something he could afford to ignore. Defeated, Thompson had no choice but to back down. And just like that, the power he had wielded over the neighborhood crumbled. As for James, he sat back, relaxed, and enjoyed his newly upgraded pool, without a single worry about Thompson ever bothering him again. In the days following the incident, the atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted. James could feel the difference every time he stepped outside. The tension that had once lingered over his property was gone. Neighbors who had once hesitated to interact with him now smiled and waved. Some even came over to congratulate him for standing up for himself. It was clear that Thompson's grip over the community had loosened. Thompson, on the other hand, kept a low profile. Gone were the days of him patrolling the block, looking for reasons to complain. He no longer stood outside, glaring over the fence, waiting for James to make a mistake. Instead, he avoided eye contact, kept to himself, and, for the most part, stayed inside his house. It was a strange sight to see someone who had once taken such pride in controlling others suddenly stripped of his authority. James, however, didn't let himself dwell on it for too long. He had wasted enough time dealing with Thompson's antics, and now he was focused on enjoying his home the way he had always intended. His new pool became the heart of the neighborhood. Friends, family, and even new acquaintances stopped by regularly to relax and spend time together. The laughter and joy that filled the space made it clear. This was exactly what James had wanted all along. One evening, as James was setting up for another small get-together, he heard a hesitant knock at his front door. When he opened it, he was surprised to find Thompson standing there, looking nothing like the arrogant man he had once been. His expression was uneasy, and for a moment he struggled to find the right words. I just wanted to say," Thompson started, shifting awkwardly. "I was out of line. With everything. I let my own issues get in the way, and He cleared his throat. "I shouldn't have treated you like that." James didn't say anything right away. He studied Thompson, trying to figure out if this was another one of his games. But for the first time, the man in front of him didn't seem like someone trying to manipulate the situation. He just looked tired. James nodded. "Appreciate you saying that." Thompson gave a stiff nod in return before glancing toward the backyard, where the sound of splashing and laughter carried through the air. "Looks like you did a nice job with it." James smirked. "Yeah, turns out I didn't need anyone else's permission to enjoy my own home." Thompson exhaled, something almost like a laugh escaping his lips. "Guess not." He hesitated again before saying, "Well, I'll let you get back to it. Just wanted to say my piece." James watched as Thompson turned to leave. There was a part of him that still didn't fully trust the man, but another part knew that this was probably as close to closure as he was going to get. He wasn't expecting Thompson to change overnight, but at least now he understood that his actions had consequences. As James returned to his backyard, he felt lighter. The conflict that had once loomed over him was finally over. More than that, he had proven something important, not just to Thompson, but to himself. He had stood his ground, defended what was his, and done it all without sinking to Thompson's level. The party carried on, and as the night settled in, James leaned back in his chair, taking in the sight of his home filled with people who appreciated and respected him. He had turned a battle into a victory, not just by winning against Thompson, but by creating a space where he truly felt at peace. And in the end, that was the best kind of payback he could have ever asked for.